Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Rodcast. I'm sitting here with Pastor Rod, and today we're going to talk about mission and the mission of Jesus being central to our life and all the different parts of our life, like pointing towards Him and serving Him, and how to do that in a healthy way long term. And the reason I asked Pastor Rod if we could talk about this is we've just come back from a really amazing few days in Japan with our lots of our leaders. We had some great speakers there as well, and I feel like my team here in Hong Kong, because I pastor here in Hong Kong, if you don't know, um, we've come back with a real strong sense of mission, just a greater sense of mission. I think for some people that was reawakened. For others, they're discovering that maybe for the first time. And one thing that I've always been inspired by seeing Pastor Rod and Pastor Viv lead is that mission was at the center of their life, and yet that you'd kind of built your life in a way that was it was healthy, it was sustainable, there was a rhythm to it that was really attractive. Because I, as a young person coming into Lifehouse at age 22, I wanted to do something big for God. It was a huge reason why I was even in Asia at the first place. I was lacking purpose in my life. And I came into a Lifehouse church and I saw what you were doing in Japan. And I was so inspired by that. And it just seemed healthy the way you were leading. And I've now been with you guys for 17 years and I've seen that to be true. It wasn't just on the surface. It really is true that you've always kept God's mission at the center. And so I don't know where to go with this, but or in terms of where to start. But how did you get this kind of style of leadership and way of living your life where the call of God is central and things seem to flow into that? I don't know where you
Mm.
want to take that large question, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I got saved at 19 and I was a fireman, and becoming a believer, a lot of it was about purpose and finding a
Mm,
mission for my life. I was purposeless, even though I had a good job, felt very purposeless. And so I came to Jesus after reading the New Testament and realized just how much Jesus did talk about living on purpose, living for mission. Your situation, you come from a Christian background, but you got turned on to mission
mhm.
at a certain
Yeah,
point, and both are very valid stories for everyone listening.
yeah.
But for me to be like born into um, mission was wonderful. You know, I was 19, and all of a sudden I had a real purpose and mission, and it changed a lot of my changed my compass, things I wanted to do in life, things I wanted to accomplish. Um, and I got I became a believer in a very small church, but they had missionaries all around the church. I didn't stay in that church very long. I was actually kicked out for believing in the gifts of the Spirit as a new Christian. I don't know if you
Oh,
ever heard
really?
that story, but
No.
um, I
Okay.
got born again on a Sunday night. I got filled with the Holy Spirit, and I just believe what the Bible said, that you can have the gifts of the Spirit. Anyway, that's a different story we could talk about someday. But that
Mm,
church did have photos of missionaries on the wall, and I thought that's
right.
interesting. What's that? And
Yeah.
then I read, Jesus' Great Commission. Um, Matthew 28, where Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations, all ethnic groups.
Yeah.
Um, and baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age in this mission. In my NIV Bible, the whole section is called the Great Commission. And so that's what it's called with a lot of people around the world. Jesus' resurrection, his
Mhm.
resurrection commission. He's now raised from the dead. He's about to ascend into heaven. This is it. And
Mhm.
he gives this calling to everyone to be part of this sharing the good news with all ethnic groups. And I just really, as a young believer, I believed that. I thought, okay. Um, at that point, I had no idea of going to Asia, zero.
Right.
It wasn't like I was called to go to Asia. I was just felt called to be a fireman, a new Christian who loved Jesus in the fire brigade, having a mission. And so as a result, I began to pray for my fireman friends, and was able to lead two of them to know Jesus in the next, say, 3 months. First one was in 6 weeks, and then another 6 weeks. But I thought that was just what we do. I thought that,
Yeah.
okay, wherever you are, you're on a mission, because Jesus said, I'll be with you. I'm with you always in the mission. So, and then I went to a church which was then called Christian Life Center, and it was very mission focused, and I was able to be on a mission team, etc. So, but the key or the core is that I read that scripture and thought, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we do. We live on mission, no matter whether we're an accountant or a pastor or a whatever we do, teacher.
Mm.
We're actually here to be part of God's great mission in the world. So that's that. I was just
Yeah.
born into it as a 19-year-old.
Okay. Because the reason I've been thinking about this recently is that I do think that sometimes in life, either this can creep into our own Christianity where mission becomes almost like another thing we do. It's kind of tacked on, or our relationship with God is like just a part of our life rather than being at the center and integrated throughout everything and everything pointing in one direction. And so sometimes it seems like there's almost competing priorities, things that compete with the mission rather than things kind of integrating together. I think your life, I've always seen it's very integrated, and like you haven't been distracted.
Yeah, and I, after I was a fireman, and then I was a salesman for a number of years, and the same thing as a salesman, I brought the mission into that, which doesn't mean I was preaching to everyone. I was not,
Mm,
but
yeah.
I was aware that there's some needs around, and if my salesman buddy's telling me about his marriage problem, which he did on one day, and I was able to say, "Hey, do you mind if I just pray for you? I believe in a God that helps." Or, just integration. This is not a big deal for me to not preach to people, but certainly to be a good voice at times of need,
Hmm.
no matter what I was doing. And then I was a pastor after that. But I've always thought, God, give me opportunities to be a blessing wherever I am. So that's integration.
Mm,
It's not bringing religion into my workplace, but it's looking for opportunities to be a blessing in my workplace or in my home or wherever, a sports field or wherever it is, that there's an integration. And I do think that um, Jesus taught the concept of integration, that
yeah.
lives that are very separate or disparate or different zones, I think that's higher stress. That's a stressful life where now I've got to put on my religious garb for Sunday or my
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
garb for working days, but put it all together. Like, not as I keep saying it, not being a pain in the workplace,
Yeah.
a Bible basher, I think we call it in Australia, but being a person who is integrated, bringing God into the workplace, helping me to be a better salesman, to be a to be better at what I do, for you to be better in business or management or whatever, better
Hmm.
teacher. That's integration. I think it's less stressful living a
Hmm.
life like that, and enjoying every moment.
Yeah, I think there's a big word for that, decompartmentalization or something like that. You know that word where everything is kind of split up into compartments in our life, and I think that's the problem. I think over time, I as I've been in Hong Kong longer, like I started to realize that if we're really gonna reach the city, kind of everything needs to be pointed towards that, including you know our marriages, being united with our spouse in what we do for church, even down to what I wear. And there was one time, this this is kind of random, but I was in a nice cafe in Hong Kong, and a really sharp looking business guy sat down next to me, and I'd only been in Hong Kong for a year or two, and I still had long hair and just looked real scruffy, like the average Aussie, ripped jeans and all that kind of stuff. And I sat this really sharp looking guy sat next to me, and I felt like God said to me, "Would you like that guy in your church?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." Like at the time, we were just reaching kind of university students, and that was great, but we wanted to reach everyone. And then I felt like God asked me, "Do you think he would follow you?" And with because of the way that I look, and I felt like I honestly couldn't answer yes, because I I needed to clean myself up a bit, and I wouldn't say that I'm sharpest looking person in the world right now, but I literally went that day and cut my hair. And so it was the first time of like kind of having this revelation that maybe there's more parts of my life that need to point towards this mission. Like if I had this part of my life that was just separate, even just a silly thing like my fashion, but if that can help me to reach people for Jesus, then I think I need to change some of that. And it wasn't something that someone forced on me legalistically. It
Sure.
was a revelation
Yeah.
that I want to reach more people. Yeah, so that's what I guess that's what I'm trying to get to with integration. It's like all parts of our life
Sure.
pointing towards
Yeah.
this. But yeah, do you have any examples of that, like that kind of thing happening in your life, or?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Apostle Paul says, I become like all, the Romans or whoever, that I
Mm,
might, that
yeah.
I might win some. So that's a mission heart. And we're
Hmm.
talking about mission here. A mission heart
Hmm.
is changing something about me to reach them. And I was, as a young person, I went to the Philippines and I was told by a missionary. I think I must have had an attitude. I don't know. Terrible, terrible thought. And he said,
How old
Rod,
were
it's
you?
easy I don't know,
How old were you? You don't know?
20
Early.
something.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Um, and he just said one statement. He said, Rod, it's easy to change one. You like in the Philippines at that time, there was 70 million people. Now there's like 110 million, but back then 70 million. And he said, it's easier to change one than it is to
Mm,
change 70 million.
yeah.
Like it's easy if you change rather than you expect them to change in your context,
Yeah.
which is what you were talking about in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
a very different culture than Australia. So
Yeah.
we're talking about context of being on mission in your context.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had plenty of. I think thinking back to the Philippines. I think it might have been about. Now again, today this is not an issue in the Philippines, but 40 years ago, it was sort of rude to show your legs in public, so you should wear long pants
Right.
in public, especially if you're a public person. And me being Australian, shorts and flip flops, mate.
Yeah.
Because I'm Australian and I can. And I
Yeah.
think that's when he
Yeah.
said to me, Rod, it's easier to change one than you
Hmm.
expect them to come and like you like that.
Hmm.
Today, you can wear shorts in the Philippines. It is not an issue. But 40
Hmm.
years ago, so just, again, to any Filipinos listening, it's right. It's okay to wear shorts. But back then, I needed to learn that. And here in Japan, we've had some Aussies come in and, oh yeah, I'm Australian, mate. But the culture doesn't match Japan, and we've had to say, there's nothing wrong with your culture. I'm Australian too, but you're in a country of 125 million. It's easier to change one than change 125 million. And most Aussies are awesome. Hey, like
Yeah.
they go, oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't realize. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to have that chat and say, for example, I think Australians, we're Australian, so we're able to
Yeah.
talk. We can
Yeah.
talk like this. But I think Australians have a little bit of a sarcastic edge. We like
Yeah.
sarcasm,
Sure.
but sarcasm is not understood in many Asian
Mm.
cultures. So if I said
Yeah.
to you, Richard, get a haircut, mate, because we're
Yeah.
buddies,
Hmm.
and an Asian was listening, they'd think you're very rude.
Hmm.
But we're just having fun. So that sarcasm just needs to be understood. Like, who are you with, and will they misunderstand you? And
Hmm.
that's what Paul is saying. With the Romans, I'll be like a Roman, or the Greeks will be like a Greek. I'll understand culture. And again, this is not stressful. Like, oh no, I got to change
Yeah.
everything about being Aussie. No. Just a few things, such as sarcasm. I don't know if you've faced that in Hong Kong too, but
Oh, absolutely. Well, when I got to Japan, I was incredibly negative, just generally, and so most of the humor that went along with that was sarcasm. In fact, I felt like there was a point where I was actually starting to realize that I was negative because I didn't think I was negative. I thought I was normal. Um, Actually, Dan told me I was negative. One
we love
one of
Dan.
our staff
He's
in
an
Tokyo.
Aussie. He's an Aussie.
Yeah,
Okay.
an Aussie. And he was an Aussie that had been in Japan longer, and so maybe he'd been through that himself. I don't know, but I've never known Dan to be negative. But he came out of Australia, so and I started seeing he was right, and I was worried that if I'm not negative, how will I be funny? Like, will my humor be gone? If I lose that sarcastic edge, what can I joke about? And that was a bit of a journey. It's kind of a silly thought when I think back on it, but I was genuinely concerned. Like, but there's like, how will I have fun if I can't be negative?
Mm.
And that's just not true at all.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I've been through that.
Yeah. So I think mission makes us aware
Hmm.
that the world is bigger than us, and that we must actually pay attention, and also pay attention to people. All of a sudden, someone's hurting. Pay attention to that, or someone's
Yeah,
had a joyful moment. Asking about that, and that's being on mission to me. Is just being aware of others around us.
yeah. What about when things become unhealthy? Because sadly, I've seen some people in ministry almost kind of blame mission for struggles in different areas of their life, maybe in their marriage or things like that. I've heard people really say, like, I've heard people say that they don't want to be here, but God has called them here, and
Right.
their wife's really unhappy, and it's problems in their marriage, like a pretty sad story, and it's almost like mission gets blamed for that. How
Yeah.
do we keep mission at the center of our life, like living this big life for Jesus, but not go to that? Like, it seems like an extreme. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, we've had to pastor people with those problems or that concern a number of times, and I've said to them, either you've got to come to a place of peace, or maybe this is not the place for you. Maybe you should go home to Australia or
Mm,
wherever, in a nice way. I'm not telling them to go. I'm just saying
yeah,
the third option, to stay and complain, is not an option. That's really a hard option. It's the
yeah,
same with someone in a workplace where they're always complaining. It's like, well, you have to find a place of happiness, or you find a new job, But to stay in this middle ground and complain is not the will of God.
yeah,
And I think both sides will happen. Either they will change and find a new place of service and mission and be happy, or they will actually leave. And both of those are options. So I just think we need to pastor people or help people to discover, is this a place we should be? And then we've got to find a place of happiness and resolve these things, or else go somewhere else. And as I said, I've seen both responses, which is their response. So you got to be happy, and that's what Paul again teaches in the New Testament. Whatever condition, whatever situation I find myself, I must be happy, or I must find
mm,
contentment. Is the word. So I think the thing for Christians being in mission, you've got to be contented.
yeah,
And we look at our own lives here in Japan. 23 years. It's been a long time.
mm,
Why did we stay? Well, we're on mission, but also we found a place of contentment on mission.
yeah,
And that doesn't mean everything's good or we like everything, but but if we're in Australia, we probably wouldn't like everything.
yeah,
So you've got to find a place of contentment and peace. The same with church life. People say, I don't know which church. I say, we've got to find a place of peace, and it
yeah,
fits your mission. A church now, no church is a perfect match, so we have to change ourselves to fit into church cultures. Which is normal. Someone that doesn't fit into church cultures will go to 19 different churches,
yeah, yeah,
and say they all haven't. But most people, when we talk about mission here in Japan, let's say we have someone from whatever country, um, or someone from another church, which is rare. We don't often get that. And usually they're happy, like, oh wow, great church, and that's great, love this, like that. But after a while, well, that's not like my old country. And we have
hmm,
to say, well, it's not your old country, um, and you won't find a perfect match. So you need to, in mission, you need to give way,
yeah,
not on the absolutes, but on the preferences. And this is a really important word, actually, in this discussion. Is you're never going to have all your preferences, whether it's a job or a church or company
yeah.
or
That's
even
more
marriage.
like a
Come on,
life thing, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
what business, like, what company can you work for where you love absolutely everything about what they do? Like, it's
yeah.
impossible.
It's not. It's impossible, or else you start your own, right?
Yeah,
But even then, you're going to have troubles. But
yeah,
yeah, so I say to people, you've got to find what is preference and what is mission. or what is preference, and what is conviction?
Mhm.
Like, you got to have it, and what is just preference? I think that's a really important discussion here with
Mhm.
mission, because
Mhm.
I've heard people say, I'm missing this back home and I'm missing that back home, and I'm saying, well, you can either, you know, sort of get over that missing, or
Mhm.
maybe one day you're going to have to go back to get that thing.
Mhm.
Um, some people leave over things I think is just pure preference, but I can't say anything.
Sure.
But I'd rather them go and be happy than stay and complain. And I think that is the way I've always lived my life. Like, if you're going to live somewhere, enjoy it. Love the place you're in. And, Jesus said the kingdom of God is within you. God's goodness should be within us wherever we are.
Mhm.
Um, if you can't work that through peacefully, you've got to wonder whether you're called or in the right place. But with a good challenge, a challenge means, hey, why don't you consider that this is a place for you and that you find peace here? I found a lot of people come to peace with
Right.
living in Japan or Hong Kong or wherever. Like, it was, thank you for that nice challenge. I prayed about it. And yes, I can deal with that. And I'm really glad I'm here, which is probably you, Richard. That's
Yeah.
your story,
Yeah.
right?
I think there's no perfect place. There's no perfect situation. You don't marry a perfect person. So if you hold on to that perfectionism, it's not going to work in literally anything
No.
because we're not in heaven yet. And yeah, I mean, I know you're a nature lover. You love the beach, and I mean, you're not like on the beach where you live. If you had your preference, you'd probably
Yeah,
love to have a beach right next door.
sure.
That's the way I grew up. I miss the beach in Australia. I do.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but I don't live in that complaint. Um,
sure.
try to have holidays with beaches.
That's good. Yeah. I've got a great quote I want to bring in right now, simply because it's been a part of my. You asked, how early did I get on a mission?
Yeah.
A missions quote by a man called C.T. Studd. Have you
Mhm.
heard of C.T. Studd? He
I
was
have. I
a
don't know what he did, but
Yeah, so he was about 150 years ago in England,
yeah.
and he was one of the first cricketers. In fact, he played cricket
Oh,
against
right. Yes.
Australia, and at the end they burnt the ball and made it the Ashes. This is an Australian England thing
Oh.
for any other viewers. Just, it's a sports thing. It's very famous. So every time England plays Australia, they play for the Ashes. It's like the prize. So he was part of that team. He was in Cambridge
Okay.
University from a very wealthy family, and his dad had a business, and he was going to take over the business, and very clever and smart. But he got challenged. He went to a crusade with an American preacher called D.L. Moody, and he heard him talk about destiny, this eternity, and it actually really riveted him. And he said, "I'm not. I could live for all this other stuff, but I want to live for what God's will is." And he went away, and C.T. Studd became part of what they call the Cambridge Seven students. Went to China with um, the mission there, and lived his life in India and Africa, and opened up the world, and opened up like youth movements, student movements. And I say all that to say this statement. This is the statement. This is the quote that, apart from the Bible, really has had a big impact on my life. He says this: "Only one life will soon be passed, and only what's done for Christ will last." And I think it's such a big part of my mission,
Mhm.
that there's one life. And you were talking about you'd rather be at the beach, and yeah, that's preference. But we were living on
Mhm.
mission. We can
Mhm.
live anywhere and do anything. And my understanding of that is, an old surfer is. I was even thinking about this morning. I guess we talk about it a lot. But I gave up the beach to be on mission, and it seems a little thing, but it really was my life
Yeah.
for so much. I love surfing. But I honestly believe in heaven, God says He's going to create a new earth, a new heaven, a new earth. And whether that's a brand new earth or this earth, God repletes it with its original purpose and beauty and rainforests, and which I think probably is the case. But I have a picture of heaven, of me surfing, of me getting a reward of the best surf spot in the whole world, and lots of waves. I know this sounds very, very silly for anyone, but I think there's
Sure.
rewards.
Yeah.
of what we gave up for the one life here on earth for
Mhm.
heaven. There's a lot of things we can do in heaven, but one of them is not win souls. You can't do that
Yeah.
in heaven.
Yeah.
So the purpose here on earth is this one life. Only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last. C.T. Studd, and he changed his world, and he caused a missions movement that then went to America, and literally thousands of students went on mission because of
Mm.
this one man getting a hold of eternity and destiny. I'd like to be like that.
Mm.
What about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, my kind of thing that got me at a young age was a little bit different, but has the same outcome, and that was basically the church. I think something Bill Hybels said: "The church is the hope of the world." I don't know if
Hmm.
he's quoting someone else, but I read that in something he wrote, and I my life was being changed in our church at that point, and I was like, "It's true. Like we can't like." I've had Jesus my whole life, but him working through the church, a healthy church, there's nothing like this, and everyone needs this. I just knew it. I'd experienced it, and thinking that this all started over 2,000 years ago, and what company's still around from 2,000 years ago? Nothing. Like there's nothing
No.
going on now that was around 2,000 years ago. Really, I mean, there was nations, but outside of that, like
Mm.
the church is the only thing that's lasted, and it's going to keep lasting because God's
Yeah.
behind it. It's not going anywhere. The
Mm.
bride of Christ will exist, till the end. And I just thought I got to build the church. What I want to sow into something that will last. And so that was a big part of
Mm.
my
That's great.
story. But I think what you're saying, like is you've got to get to a place where you are in there is a joy with what you're doing.
Mm.
Like I've never felt like you were just suffering in Japan. In fact, if I felt that, if I got that vibe from you, like especially at an early age, I just think I wouldn't have wanted this life.
Hmm.
You were very much a model at that point, um, and I felt like you hadn't negotiated on your own joy and contentment, and so it was serving God with mission, but it wasn't just like, oh, I've given up the beach, and you're living in that emotion of what you've given up. Um, yeah, and I think that's where I've seen it get a bit unhealthy, maybe in some people in ministry, and it's I I think God's not that cruel that He would just send you to this thing that's horrible. And even though I know in the Bible many disciples
Mm.
were killed for their faith, like the life and death situations, there's just you just don't see the complaints
Yeah.
um, there. Like Paul was saying, yeah, I've been shipwrecked and all this stuff,
Mm.
but he wasn't having a whinge about it. He didn't have that spirit. I think there was a sense of adventure and reward, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's I think we've got to do this healthy.
Yeah. I think the most attractive people you ever meet are full of healthy mission. Like
Yeah,
they're full of
yeah,
joy and purpose. They tell you their story and you're
yeah,
interested. It's an interesting story. And they've got all these troubles, but God's with me. We're overcoming. That's very interesting.
mhm.
That's a great story. That's what I want to hear.
Like
Um,
every story of Robert Barrage's, like so last week in Tokyo. One of our speakers was Pastor Robert Barrager from Peru, and just every story he's got is just one of those stories.
yeah.
Just you could have heard a pin drop in the room. Just you walk away like so inspired, like I want to live a bigger life for Jesus.
Yeah. And he tells it with such relish, even though it was a hard time. Not relish in the bad things, but his
Yeah.
response and what he
Hmm.
saw came out of a good response was that the
Hmm.
whole parts of the nation opened up to him, out of the tragedy that was happening in Peru back then, and are keeping an amazing attitude, and then the good results. So we're not saying the bad stuff was good. I think that's
Hmm.
important too. It's
Yeah.
another book
Yeah.
that really impacted me was called Destined for the Throne. It's just an old book I read as a young Christian. It's talking about in early in Corinthians, it says that when we get to heaven, we'll be judged according to what we did. And if it's fleshly stuff, it's all going to be burnt up. There's no reward. But if we did things that was called gold and silver and costly stones, we get a reward and it lasts forever. That's what I'm talking about, my surfing in heaven. It's like just me and God have a little thing on the side, like looking forward to that. I don't know. But the point is destiny. I think we need to think about this and preach this more and more and more. A lot of people have insurances in life, car insurance, house insurance, life insurance, but I want to have heaven insurance. In other words, not getting there. But when I'm there, God says, here you go. You did well, son. You did well, daughter, to my wife. You did. Here you go. I think that way. I think in terms of rewards in heaven. I think we're supposed to preach on rewards and think about rewards because this life is short. I'm a lot older than you, Richard, but it was like yesterday I was your age. Just
yeah.
But eternity is forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and it's something that we actually need to think about. Like Jesus said, store up for yourself things in heaven. Store up things. And I think it's probably a big area we need to discuss more and more. Like store up, have insurance for heaven. How? Not by paying our way, but by sacrificing, doing things, making decisions, and knowing that God will give back to us.
And I think, sadly, there's a lot of wrong thinking around reward. Like it's almost like a bad thing to talk about. Like we should just be motivated by this pure, unselfish motivation of I just want to serve God and I don't want any reward. But yet we're wired for reward, and Jesus talked about reward all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we do need to talk about it.
Yeah.
About that more.
And destiny, like the one thing that you're supposed to do on the earth. In heaven, God will say, you did a lot of things. Did you do the one thing I asked you to do? The one thing. And that is destiny to me. Did you do it? Like you loved your wife. That's great. You do this. Yes, you get reward for all that. But did you do the one thing you were created to do in the world? The gap. Did you fill the gap? Did you fill the hole? Did you help the people? That's what Jesus said. When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. And these are the scriptures really do motivate me to have a mission, to love people and love God in this world. Yeah, even though it's hard, but it's good. It's good. I think one of the things Viv and I said early on is we want to live a life of no regret.
Yeah.
So, when I gave up my job as a salesman, I was doing really well. I joked that I had to give up my large salary, my mid-20s, my large salary. I had to give up my company car, a new Volvo, because it was a Swedish company, and I had to give up. But am I going to remember all that, or am I going to remember what I gained? And I gained a life of coaching and loving people. So no regrets. I sort of laugh about that. But there was sacrifice, but it was a good sacrifice. It was for something we saw as better. And being married to Viv, who's a very generous person, there's been no regrets. When we left our home in Australia to move to Japan, we had just built our dream home. It was Viv's dream home, helped design it. Beautiful, beautiful home. But no regrets because we know God will take care of us. And life of no regrets is a good life.
Yeah, that's you've talked about that a lot over the years, and that's really impacted me as well, is trying to think through almost like a deathbed perspective of being an old person on, and you're about to go and looking back over your life. What will you regret, and what will you be glad that you put your time into?
Yeah.
And your energy into. And
John Maxwell says that in one of his early books, and I've always talked about 90-year-olds, interviewing 90-year-olds and saying, if you had your time again, what would you do differently? And there was 3 answers. I can't remember them all, but one of them was better relationships. Another one, I would risk more, and live for purpose. And so these are the elderly regrets of not doing it. And I'd say to every young person, don't, think deeply about what is this one life. And again, that C.T. Studd quote, only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last is penetrating into my heart.
Hmm.
that this is the way I want to live my life for God's purpose. And it's a good purpose, and he does reward. And
Yeah,
it's
and the way
joyful. Mm.
it is, and the way that God has kind of engineered all of this is that it's not just eternal reward. You've
No.
what I see of your life is blessing and great relationships, and like that things happen here on earth too. And I
Yep.
think for those sacrifices that I've made on this journey, I feel like I, like even if it was just for the earthly rewards at this point, like it's significant. But then there's this whole eternal aspect as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, the Apostle Peter said to Jesus, we're following you. What's left for us? And Jesus said, you will not fail to receive,
Mhm.
whatever you gave, houses and family,
Yeah.
and we'd say cars and opportunities, and you will not
Mhm.
fail to receive those and more, and
Mhm.
receive it in heaven as well. And so there's this two. That's what you're saying, that
Yeah,
the
that's
two
right.
phase reward. There's some here and there's some in heaven. So, I mean, looking at your life too, you and Janice and your four amazing boys and your life there, I love visiting you. It's just a joy to see you flourishing.
Mm. Yeah,
um, yeah, you got the most amazing boys. They're crazy. They're wonderful.
yeah, yeah,
What a
yeah.
life.
It really is, and I love telling people now. I mean, like I turned 40 this year, and I love telling young people like this works.
Mm,
Like when I was 22, I bought into this dream of serving God, and I didn't think that was going to be pastoring, but I just was like, okay, I got to build the church with my
mm,
life. If that's,
yeah,
in fact, I thought I'd go into business and make money and fund the church.
sure.
That's
Yep.
what was my initial thought.
Hmm.
But um, just having a life that's pointed towards that. And over the years, like trying to consistently orient my life in that direction, not perfectly, but I've tried my best. And um, hey, it works. Like, you know, this is real. God,
It's great.
yeah, it's
Wh-
rewarding
what
serving
month
God.
do you turn 40, Richard?
August.
Okay. Well, make sure we're aware of that when it comes
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
Milestone. Yeah, you've
No,
done
I've
well.
told my team, I said, I'm going to party. Get ready. I'm going to celebrate. Yeah.
What day is it?
August 20.
20 August. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take a note of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. You're a champion.
Yeah. Well, a lot of this I've really modeled after you guys. Like, you know that. And I just want to encourage any young people listening to this, not just young
Yeah.
people, but specifically the
Yeah.
young people.
Yeah.
Make Jesus the center of your life and
Yeah.
build your life pointed around serving
Yeah.
Him.
It's
Whatever
great.
you do, whether that's
Mm,
in business or as a parent or in church life, orient it towards Him and His purposes
yeah.
because it's good. And there'll be
It's good.
sacrifice, there'll be costs, and but it's worth it,
Yeah.
and it feels good.
It's great. Come on.
Yeah,
It's good. I guess we're going to finish in a minute. There's a great quote
yeah.
by a Catholic Jesuit priest that came to Japan 500 years ago and saw the Japanese Open, and he
Hmm.
made this comment, this quote, give up your small ambitions and come and change the world. I
Hmm.
guess that's what we're saying. It's what Jesus is calling us to: go into all the world, make disciples. Give up. You got to give up to go up.
Hmm.
Is another saying I learned from the '80s. A guy
Hmm.
called Zig Ziglar, a Christian motivational speaker of the '80s, and
Hmm.
you got to give up to go up. All these. I think we should be motivating ourselves through
Yeah.
Bible, little quotes and quips, and creating a circle of life that is full
Hmm.
of meaning and purpose. I think we're going to have better mental health, better physical health, better relationships, and live a great life. Wow, sounds good.
Hmm. And even like I was thinking about this as you were talking before, but it's not even just a kingdom principle, the giving up to go up. You see that in the non-Christian world. Anything that's worthwhile is hard work. It's
Yeah,
sacrifice. Like you don't win a gold medal by accident. You work really, really hard for years, and oftentimes we see that done in an unhealthy way. Maybe there's other sacrifices that are not worth it, like people sacrificing their marriage or things like that. But But the principle is still on this earth, that if things have a cost,
Yeah.
and so let's pay the right costs. Let's
Yeah.
sacrifice the right things
Good.
for the things that are truly worth it. Yeah. Cool. Well, maybe we'll wrap it up here. We've been 40 minutes. Great topic. And once again, thank you for always being such a great example in this. And I hope that everyone listening has been encouraged to point their life towards Jesus. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, why don't you subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this, and we'll see you next time.